Befriend, barter, betray. These, like in all good games, are cornerstones of The Binding of Isaac, The Four Souls. A board game brought to you by Edward McMillan, an indie video game developer behind The Binding of Isaac and Super Meat Boy, among other successful indie video games. But the question you're here for today is, The Binding of Isaac, The Four Souls, is it any good? And what is The Binding of Isaac, The Four Souls? Let's take a closer look at the game to find out. First, let's start talking about the PC game that inspired this card game. The Binding of Isaac was released for PC in 2011, and depending on your interpretation of the story, Isaac is a little boy that lives with his mother. His mother is a big fan of God. Unfortunately for Isaac, God one day informs Mom that Isaac must die. So she attempts to murder him. Isaac may or may not escape into the basement. That is the most basic interpretation of the plot, and absolutely none of that matters at all for the Four Souls. However, if you have played a few hours on the PC game, like myself, you will appreciate the adaptations of the items as well as the enemies that have made the transition to the card game. On the surface, the Four Souls is a very simple game. You control one of several babies in hopes to murder some monsters and acquire their souls until you have 4 of them. On the way, you'll gain some powers, get some pennies, and probably screw over your friends. Four Souls officially suggests 2 to 4 players, although I have played it with more, and it does get hectic if you try to mess with the formula. Each player is dealt a character card with their corresponding starting item, 3 loot cards, and they will also receive 3 pennies. The table is set with 2 monster cards and 2 item cards face up. The center of the table is the field of play, where players will battle monsters, play loot cards, and roll dice. Loot cards go into your hand and have a few different effects. Some are basic, such as bombs, pills, and pennies. There are tarot cards, which can greatly change the course of a game, as well as trinkets, which are like mini treasures that add passive effects to your character. Treasure cards are powerful items. They are won from bosses or purchased in the shop for 10 cents. Treasure cards are played directly in front of a player, so they are visible to everyone. Some have an arrow symbol, signifying they require activation in response to an action. Others are passive, which contribute a continuous effect to the game. Finally, there are paid items, which have a fee associated with their use. These cards are marked with a $sign. Monster cards are the most important cards on the table, as this will likely be how you acquire souls. Monsters that have souls are bosses and feature this icon in the corner. Bosses are significantly more challenging than a typical monster. Let's talk about how you play. The game begins with the player that has Cain as their character. If no one has drawn Cain, the saddest player will go first. Often that is me. A turn is split into several phases. On the first phase, you will recharge all items and your player card, and then draw a loot card. Then we come into the action phase. Several things may occur during the action phase, and they can occur in any order. You may play a loot card, you may attack a monster, you may purchase an item for 10 cents, or you may activate your player card by turning it sideways, which allows you to play an additional loot card. The third and final phase is the ending phase. All players and monsters are healed. You must discard down to 10 loot cards if you have more than 10 in your hand, and turn rotation continues to the left. Let's say you want to attack. Attacking a monster has one simple rule. You must fight until one of you dies. Of course, this means players will die during a game. I will talk about that in just a moment. Fighting a monster involves rolling the 6-sided die and reading the card appropriately. Quite simple for even the youngest of children. The die value determines the roll that must be beaten to damage the monster. If a roll fails, the sword value will determine how much damage the monster will do in retaliation. The heart value on the card indicates the health of the monster. Some monsters have passive effects in their text box. At the bottom of a card, you will identify which reward you will receive when the monster is defeated. There's an 8-sided die included for tracking the monster's health. When the monster is defeated, you will gain the reward, and the card is discarded unless it is a soul card, which are kept in front of the player. Another monster card is then drawn and placed on the field of play. That's all well and good. However, what will happen if a player dies? Well, quite simply, they pay the death penalty. They lose one non-eternal item in their possession. They must discard a loot card, and they will lose 1 penny. In addition, their player becomes deactivated, as well as all of their items. Their turn ends, and they will be unable to react to any action until the next turn. And with that, we talk about where the game really gets interesting. The backstabbing reaches an all-time high when you react to another player's action. Let's give an example. Player 1 is attacking a monster that needs a 4 or higher to deal damage. Player 1 rolls their dice and they end up with a measly 3, signifying they will fail the roll. However, my good friend Player 2 has a Book of Belial, which will raise the roll by 1, which they've offered to activate in exchange for 2 cents. The exchange is made, the roll resolves, and the monster receives damage. Let's take another look at that and let things get a little more interesting. Let's revisit the same scenario. Player 1 rolls their dice, ends up with a 3. Player 2 activates the Book of Belial for the agreed 2 cents, raising the roll by 1. Player 1 smiles broadly, happy that they are about to damage the monster, where some jerk, such as myself, might activate their d6, causing Player 1 to re-roll. Their new roll is now a 2, failing to damage the monster, and they also lose the 2 cents they've given to the other player. Welcome to the Four Souls, everybody, because that is where the game really shines. It is very gratifying to see someone almost kill a powerful boss, only to activate your player card to play a bomb and kill that player instead. Typically, the game will continue until someone has several items and dominates the entire field of play with multiple effects on every roll or item activation. But this doesn't mean it is not fun. The goal is still to achieve 4 souls, and all players have a fair shot of winning. Expect a game to take about an hour. House rules are welcome and encouraged. Some people may choose to trade items or loot cards for favors instead of just money. These people are wrong. You should only ever trade pennies, unless you are trading with me. The game also includes 3 bonus souls, the soul of Gluttony, Greed, and Guppy. These souls are awarded to whoever achieves the condition written on the card. I did not recommend including these in your first game, especially if you're playing against a total jerk like myself. Since I purchased this game, my friends and I have enjoyed it, and it is often requested when people come over for game night. Many of the people I play with have never even heard of the PC game, which is not required to enjoy or appreciate the fun of the Four Souls. The game is simple to learn, requires both skill and luck to win, especially if you play as the Lost. Don't play as the Lost. As of this recording, there is an expansion pack available for the base game. If it has not been obscenely clear in this review, I do recommend The Binding of Isaac: The Four Souls for anyone that does not have a moral objection to playing as a cross-dressing baby that fights monsters. Tune in next time for more reviews and other nonsense. To all adbots and other automated accounts, please like and subscribe to artificially boost my followers.